how would you see security as an agenda? If we were to broaden it itself for a country like Singapore, how should we see this as a national security agenda given the BANI world that we are facing today?
Good afternoon, everyone. What has this to do? Actually, I don't know. I was taught that security, economics, politics, they are all intertwined. Maybe the way we have seen it separately in the past was really not the most helpful, but I think from where I was brought up, the economic security, what we call military security, physical security, and even domestic security, social cohesion, these are all intertwined issues. So I don't think it's something new that we have to grapple with, because the fact of the matter is that you can't have economic progress unless there's stability, and you can't have stability unless you are able to take care of your own security, and that security must be underpinned by your economic development. So if you like, it's a bit of a double helix that they are always reinforcing. So to me, the two are always related. So if I may say, maybe beyond what I call the double helix, is actually three strands always have to come together for society to progress. One, physical security. Two, economic security. And three, your domestic cohesion. So these three must always come together. And in today's world, whatever we call it, whether it's in VUCA or BANI, I don't think that has changed. Right?
I wanted to check in, because you've got really vast experience working as a minister in various ministries itself, whether it's education, whether it's trade. In this light, right, what would be some of the key concerns or priority areas that as a country in Singapore we would be focusing on? I mean, in this morning there's a lot of talk about energy security. There's also a lot of talk about, what does it mean for us as a hub status?
What should we be focused on? Maybe I give a slightly different spin. There are many things in the world that we can't be in control. Whatever the big powers do, whatever other people do, we can't be in control. So why don't we recenter the attention on our attention on what we can do? So I think there are a few things that I think we can do, we should do, and we must do. First, it's called stay out of trouble. It's not funny, it's a very serious business. Stay out of trouble. And I really mean it. The world has enough troubles. I said this when I was concluding the Shangri-La dialogue. The world has enough troubles. If only we can stay out of trouble, if only ASEAN or Asia can stay out of trouble, we would naturally distinguish ourselves already. But staying out of trouble is not so easy, right? Staying out of trouble means that people, leaders, must have a perspective that there is much more to gain by working together than to squabble or start a fight over some other issues, either for short-term gains or domestic to placate or meet certain domestic considerations. So you require leadership, you require perspective for everyone to agree that it's better for us to stay out of trouble and to seize those opportunities. Today, the world has a lot of troubles, but the world also has many people looking for opportunities to invest and grow. And if we can distinguish ourselves by staying out of trouble, then I think we stand a better chance to attract those investments, to create better jobs for our people, and to let our people have a better quality of life going forward. So that's the first thing, stay out of trouble. Second, there's something else that we can control, which is what I call the consistency in policy making and execution. Now, you cannot control what other people do. People can be erratic, people can have their different considerations across different time frames. But if we are consistent in the way we plan and execute, it becomes what I call a very important man-made competitive advantage. Now, today we talk a lot about investments, AI, chips, fabs, energy, infrastructure. There's one thing that's common in all this, and that is the length of time required for us to make a return. The gestation period for such investments require many years. If any investor wants to get a return on their investment in the energy grid, biopharma, AI, chips, whatever, I would say that it will take at least 5, 10, if not more years. If you're a biopharma, your cycle is even longer. Then the question is, if I'm an investor, if we are the investors, where are we going to invest? We need to look for a place that will at least give us some certainty of policy and execution. And if we can maintain a certain consistency in policy making and execution, that creates a very important man-made competitive advantage. So that's the second thing. Stay out of trouble, be consistent in policy and execution. Third, I would say, for us in Singapore, we have to remain open, connected with the rest of the world. This is not rocket science. It is not something new. We have to do this ever since 1965 because nobody invests in Singapore for the sake of our domestic market, given how small it is. People invest in Singapore because of our ability to be consistent in delivery and our ability to connect with the rest of the world. So even in the 1970s, in the toughest of times during the 2 oil crises, we never nationalized anyone's property or assets for our own benefit. Even in the depth of the COVID-19 pandemic, we allow commercial contracts to be done, executed, and fulfilled, and never taking things that don't belong to us. Now, that is important. Even in the depth of the COVID-19 crisis, we make sure that our ports, our airports, our financial systems are able to connect with the rest of the world. Not just physical connectivity, but financial connectivity, data connectivity. These are important. So staying open and connected, notwithstanding the rising tide of trade barriers, digital protectionism, and so forth, we have to stand out amidst the turmoil. So that would be the third thing. Fourth thing, I think, is what I call being relevant, and the fifth one is being resilient. Relevant means that we must have a value proposition, not just based on price. We never compete on the basis of price. We must compete on the basis where we are relevant, we can produce some things that are not so easily bypassed by other people who are competing on price or scale. And we have some of those things in Singapore, but we need to keep building on those things. We need to keep finding new things. There is no one thing that is that magic panacea that will gives us eternal competitive advantage. Competitive advantage is something that we have to constantly seek, constantly work on it, constantly build in order for it to happen. And in today's world, I don't think Singapore has one answer, but we have a few or a series of small little things that can help us to entrench our relevance to the world so that we are not so easily bypassed. I say not so easily because there's no such thing as there being one panacea where people can never bypass us. In fact, if people think that they cannot bypass, they will always look for the +1 strategy, as have been shown in elsewhere in other sectors. Finally, resilience. Resilience has to do with our ability to really take a hard look at our supply chains and market. When I was in MTI, I had this very simple rule. I look at every sector. If one sector depends on more than 1/3 of its input from one particular source country or company, then I think we need to take a serious hard look at it to see whether we can be held ransom and we will be at the mercy of other people. On the other hand, if any sector depends on more than one particular market for more than 1/3 of its output, then I think we should also be rightfully concerned. So this is just a rule of thumb. It's not magic science, but we need to then build the diversity in order for us to have the resilience. But having said that, it's not theoretical. It requires effort. It takes money to diversify. Even just to stockpile and diversify our sources takes money. It's always easy for us to talk about this when we're in a crisis. But all businessmen will know that diversification requires effort and resources. And most importantly, discipline. When we don't diversify in peacetime, there is no way that we can achieve diversification when a crisis happens. So those are a few things I think we can do. This is a change from my usual tag. Usually I tell people all the problems and then people go away feeling very sad. But today, at least I think, let's focus on what we can focus on, what we can do, instead of what we cannot do and worry about the rest of the world's problems. Just a bit of a reassurance, maybe help us to feel slightly better this afternoon. We are not alone facing all the challenges in the world. Our challenge is to make sure that we emerge stronger, slightly better than the rest, can run another round. So I think these are my few little things. 1, stay out of trouble. 2, be consistent in policy making and execution. 3, remain open and interconnected. 4, make sure that we entrench our relevance to the world. 5th, make sure that we be a reliable and resilient partner for all our trading partners and our partners in other domains. So on that note.
It continues. Do you want some water first? You want to take some water? So, Minister, thanks so much for laying out the 5 points. And it's very important because I think, like what you said, for any investor or companies, many businesses here as well, the certainty, the assurance, the relevance of Singapore being continued to be open is important. However, it's not, since the topic of today is power and agency, it's not all times we can stay out of trouble. It's not all times that we could continue a free play. I mean, case in point, terrorists are being slapped around the world already. And also we've seen cases of crises happening in different parts of the world, not yet in this part of the region. Just wanted to check with you, what would you say would be a best case scenario for Singapore and the region? And later I would like to continue on to ask the question on ASEAN itself. As a power and agency at play in this part of the world, as well as what could be a possible scenario that we should all be prepared for?
Well, I don't think my way of approaching this will be what is the best case or worst case scenario, as if there is a bit of a passive backdrop that we are just responding to. Your point is very correct, and we should be very vigilant to this, which is that if we are not relevant, if we have no bargaining power, then we can rightfully expect to be squeezed. It is not just Singapore, it is the region, it is any country. I think there's a lot of talk recently about people trying to weaponize their leverage, whether it's the economic leverage or political leverage or military leverage. But I must admit that maybe growing up where I grew up, I never thought that people or countries relate to others on the basis of just being nice. Of course, there are people who are nice, there are countries who are nice, but more often than not, I think it is to be expected that countries, even companies, will want to leverage on whatever they can to exact the maximum gains for themselves. So if you can broadly agree with this, then the real question for us is, how do we create those value propositions that gives us some bargaining power, that don't end up in a situation whereby we are just right roughshod over. Now, that is an eternal quest for Singapore as a small country, a small city-state. How do we create those relevance? How do we create those value propositions where people see it in their interest to work with us? People see it in their interest to work with us. We all say this, right, in international affairs. There are no permanent friends, they are just permanent interests. So our question is not so much as what is the best or worst scenario. Our challenge and the question where we need to always answer is, how then do we create those value propositions where people want to work with us? And if I may add one corollary to this, people only want to work with us if we have real capabilities. Nobody work with someone else on the basis of, I just want to be nice. People are very busy with their own things. People want credible partners. And how can we be a credible partners? We can only be a credible partners if we can only be a credible partner if we can have real capabilities, which means our people are well trained in terms of skill sets. Our country our companies are well organized, we can deliver on our promises that others may not be able to do so. We are able to have a perspective that can value add to other people's conversation. If we have none of the above, why should we expect people to invite us to even be on the table? Right? And I think many of you in this audience will know the famous saying attributed to then DPM Jayakumar, that if we are not at the table, we'll be on the menu. Right? So in order for us to be at the table, we need real capabilities. We need well-trained people who can provide value propositions to attract investments for people to want to work with us. We need companies, we need our country to get our act together so that we can deliver on our promises. And we need to have our own perspectives, not driven by other people's interests. Many people, many countries may, of course, like us to think like them or see things in their way. That is to be expected and natural. But whether we can have our own perspective to value add to the conversation, where we deeply understand our partners and potential partners' perspectives so that we can come up with value add propositions. Therein lies the greatest challenge, but also potentially the greatest gain. So you talked about the contestation between US and China. Yes, it's true, there are many areas that the US and China will be contesting for a long time to come. But it is also true that there are also areas where US and China would want to work together, or want to work together with partners whom they can trust. Then the question is, can Singapore play in that space, no matter how tight or how difficult it might be? But it is something that we have to keep working on, and that is why I always encourage fellow Singaporeans that as we travel widely, we seek to understand our potential partners deeply so that we can then come up with value-add propositions to the relationship. Otherwise, people will ask, why should we be talking to Singapore or Singaporeans if we are unable to value-add or create value propositions that people treasure?
There's really a lot of food for thought there, be at the table rather than be on the menu, having real capabilities and offering value proposition. With that, I would like to just throw to the floor. I'm sure quite a number of you would have thoughts and questions you would like to ask the minister. It's a rare occasion. I see 3 hands here, 4 hands. So maybe, Minister, are you okay if we go one round, first round first? Okay, first round of 3 questions. We have the 2 gentlemen here and 3 gentlemen. Someone pass them the mic.
Thank you so much. My name is Patrick. I have a quick question. How can ASEAN preserve a stable, predictable, and rules-based business environment? Enables business to invest and operate with confidence in today's volatile market and the age of AI. Thank you.
Can you introduce yourself as well?
My name is Patrick Lai. I'm just some individual from Singapore. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Minister. My name is Johairul. I'm from Embraer. My question is regarding, you mentioned that when you were in MTI, you had a rule of thumb about 1/3 about sourcing from a single source and on diversification. Just want to hear your thoughts. Did you bring that philosophy into the Ministry of Defense? Do you have that rule of thumb when you diversify your partners, defense partners, and also on defense products as well? Thank you.
And then we've got one more gentleman behind. Yeah.
Thank you, Minister Chan. I learned a lot from what you have mentioned about the 5 points. I think it's very important, right? Stay out of trouble, be open, consistent, resilient, relevance. So stay out of trouble. My question really is, what happened if we are put into the trouble? What would be your thoughts and suggestion on that? Thank you.
Can you introduce yourself as well?
Sorry, Francis Quah. I'm with Aventis. I'm a director of Global Partnership.
Okay, thanks. So, Minister, we have a question on ASEAN, on sourcing, as well as being dragged into trouble.
Maybe I answer the question in reverse order, it's easier. First, stay out of trouble, right? If you find yourself in trouble, try to get out quickly. jokes aside, staying out of trouble is not, it's not just a hope. Okay. In the military, there's a saying, hope is not a method. When we say we want to really stay out of trouble, we really need to understand the perspective of different players in the international circuit. We need to understand people's fears, concerns, and aspirations. Then we need to ask ourselves, okay, if this is how they are seeing things, not what they do, but why they do what they do. Then we can think hard, think creatively, if there is a space for us to navigate this. So that even if A doesn't get along with B, we need to get along with both A and B. And that is called staying out of trouble. And of course, both A and B, in any scenario, may want Singapore to be on their side. Maybe this is a backhanded compliment to us, that at least people value where we stand. But having said that, we cannot be operating our foreign policy or economic policy at the behest of other people. We need to know what are our core interests, how we position ourselves consistently over the years, so that we will not be in a situation having to do what other people want us to do without due consideration for our own interests. So staying out of trouble is not so easy to do, but it is something that we must constantly seek to. In other words, it is about truly understanding other people's perspective, their interests, and then ask ourselves how we can work with them. Sometimes the interests are aligned, that's easy. Sometimes the interests are not aligned. Then we have to ask ourselves, even when interests are not exactly aligned, is there common ground that we can work on? If there's no common ground, is there a way for us to contain the differences while we seek common ground to progress the relationship in other ways? We cannot expect Singapore to be on common grounds with all countries on all issues. That is impossible. But we can seek for Singapore to find common ground with different partners at different points in time in different domains to at least progress the relationship where we can and to contain the differences in other areas. Okay. Second, one-third rule, actually, it's not whether I brought this from MTI to MOD, it's actually I brought this from MOD to MTI. So in all things that we do, whether it's MTI, MOE, even MTI, MINDEF, MOE, or anywhere else, I think it's just a simple rule of thumb. By the way, I didn't learn this from MINDEF per se or MTI. It is a rule that we were brought up, and when I was talking to businessmen, actually these are things that the businessman tells me whenever I meet them, because everybody is concerned about their market continuity, their supply chains continuity, and everybody has to increasingly pay attention to such issues, right? We all now talk about not just in time, but just in case. So these are things that we all have to work on. For ASEAN, there are two parts to it. One part is, how can each ASEAN country achieve that domestic stability and cohesion that allows every ASEAN country to be then able to work on the regional issues with confidence and continuity. Now, you can't have regional coherence or continuity unless each ASEAN have domestic coherence and continuity. So that, based on how ASEAN works, every one of us have to work on it ourselves, right? Then we try to support each other by having a bigger goal that we can all achieve. It is often said that by 2030, ASEAN might be the fourth largest economic entity. Might be, depending on how the trajectory goes. And indeed, there's a lot of potential for ASEAN to work together to achieve something more than the sum of our individual parts. And I always suggest three that we can consider: energy, finance, and data. Start with energy. quite a few of the ASEAN countries are potentially what we call global renewable energy superpowers. No pun intended. Because they have wind, they have geothermal, they have solar, and so forth. The vision, the idea of an ASEAN energy grid will provide, an ASEAN electric energy grid will provide actually money on the table for everyone. There are gains to be made. Then the question is, if we talk to the business people, they will say that this is a brilliant idea, right? If we can link up the ASEAN grid, we'll have greater stability, we can potentially lower the cost of energy for everyone. Then the question is, will we be able to overcome some of the domestic political challenges for this vision of the more integrated ASEAN grid to come about? We today already have certain components of this, and we hope that we can continue to grow this. For example, the LTMS link, Laos, Thailand, Malaysia, Singapore, there's a link. But beyond that, is Malaysia, Indonesia, Vietnam. Vietnam has tremendous wind power. So this is something that is very important, not just to Singapore, but to the whole of ASEAN. And if we talk about the future economy being very energy dependent or renewable energy dependent, where is the AI, data centers, and so forth, then the ability to secure reliable, affordable, and clean energy will become a challenge not just for Singapore, but the whole of ASEAN. And if we want to propel the industries of the future in ASEAN, then all of us have to put our minds together to see how we can build a more reliable, more affordable, and integrated energy grid within ASEAN. That's energy. Finance. Today, while we say that ASEAN is a potentially 600-700 million market, the question for any businesses is, when you come in to do business in ASEAN, can we seamlessly operate and aggregate our capital or mobilize our capital across different parts of ASEAN seamlessly with minimum friction and minimum transaction costs? If we can do that, then we have taken another step towards a more integrated economic proposition. Otherwise, it would be 11 disparate markets. So this is something that is, again, that we can work on to really bring out the potential of ASEAN. You look at how, say, Singapore can operate this financial system seamlessly with, say, Australia and New Zealand. There's very little technical reasons why we cannot achieve this for within ASEAN, where we can help businesses to mobilize capital and flow capitals towards a more integrated financial system. Now, that doesn't mean a common currency, don't get me wrong. I'm not talking about common currency. You don't need a common currency to do this. It's just about reducing the friction for us to do financial transactions so that businesses can grow more seamlessly. Then the third thing for ASEAN that's tremendous potential for us to work together is data. Data is, if you like, the new lubricant for the future economy. Every sector that we are interested in that has tremendous potential for growth will rely on the seamless flow of data. But data is not like oil. Oil means it's a perishable commodity. If I use it, you can't use it. It's a bit of a zero sum. Data is something that is quite different. The more we use it together, the more products and services we may be able to generate from this, the more insights we can create from this. So it's a non-zero sum resource, if you like. And question is that actually in ASEAN, the data is very rich because of the diversity of the population base. The question is that will we be able to overcome the tendency or the temptation to do data protectionism, where we see data as if it is oil, where it must be with me and not with you, and the people cannot use the data and cross-pollinate, if you like, the data to have new insights for new business propositions. So to me, for ASEAN, my own personal goal will be that if we work on these three commanding heights of the new economy, then it will provide us a basis to actually propel the rest of the economic activities: energy, finance, and data. To me, these three are the new commanding heights compared to the past.
So, Minister, can I just follow up from Patrick's question and what you have mentioned about energy finance data for ASEAN itself? I mean, these are topics that has been sort of discussed, quite a number of years as well. Although recently with the crisis, various crises around the world has accelerated discussion. Energy, for example, there are trillions of dollars of infrastructure upgrading that's required in the energy grid. Even submarine cables, we would need really good collaboration among the various countries in the region. First question for you, and second one. The first one is what do you think will really take for ASEAN countries to come together and finally agree that this is the consensus, not just consensus, but this is the collaboration that will create win-win? And second question, and since Singapore is going to chair ASEAN next year, would we be able to see good progress in this area, which should be the priority for Singapore?
Okay, my view is that I think we don't have to if you like, project too far ahead and to think that all the pieces must fall in place before we get this off the ground. So for example, ASEAN electricity grid, it doesn't mean that all the ASEAN countries must all agree that we start doing something. It doesn't work like that. You look at the LTMS, the Laos, Thai, Malaysia, Singapore connection. We can start by building bilateral or plurilateral connections first. And over time, these overlapping networks of connections will form that eventual ASEAN grid. So I think we don't have to jump too far ahead, but we can start looking at what I call bankable projects that makes economic sense, then allow the business community to drive this. The political leadership required is to make sure that we have those consistent rules, those that allows the businesses to flourish. Actually, the businesses, like you say, they are prepared to invest because they see, inverted comma, money on the table to begin. They will require the support from the political or the legal establishment to make sure that those rules are consistently applied. Then they have the confidence to invest in the long term. Because to lay a cable, say, from Vietnam to Singapore, Malaysia, it requires many years of returns, right? Many years of work before you get real rate of return from that. So I think what governments can best do is not so much to interfere with the market, but to provide that underlying foundation of certainty in rules so that the investors can get on with assessing the viability of the investments. In fact, I would be quite cautious if government starts to intervene in this because you need a certain market discipline in order for investments to flow. So that's first. But having said that, we can build the, if you like, the foundational blocks in between different countries to form that overarching ASEAN network. What I think ASEAN can do together is to signal to the rest of the world that we are prepared to do this. We are prepared to harmonize our rules, even not at once, but at least progressively, that we are going to get there. So some of the rules that we have to put in place, for example, let's say, for example, we want to do undersea cables. What are the rules that allows us to build this network of undersea cables that can allow the ASEAN grid to come about, besides depending on the land routes and so forth? So those are things which I think when it comes to rules, the government has a role to play, and ASEAN can come together to see how we can put these pieces in place. But for the financial considerations, the economic considerations, I think that's best left to the private sector. But the private sector need that certainty of rules and the clarity of direction that we are going towards.
Yeah. While Minister, please have another drink. Maybe I'll go one more round over here. So we've got 1, 2, any more hands from there? Let me see. I can't see because the light's super strong. Okay, so we have 2 hands. Come, let's take the 3 questions then over here.
Thanks very much, Minister. I'm Genevieve. I work for JP Morgan. Good to see you again. I had a question on US-Singapore defense relationships. So the US has been a very strategic defense partner for Singapore for a very long time. What we've seen with the war in the Middle East, though, and Iran, is that actually having US bases in the Middle East has not just been not a successful deterrent, but in fact it's become a bit of a liability through some perceptions. So how has this changed the lens through which we view the US-Singapore defense relationship, or any insights gleaned from what's been happening in the Middle East? Thank you.
Thank you, Zainal again. Minister, thank you very much for that candid and sharing. We appreciate that. Thank you also for sharing with us the 5 stars you mentioned just now, but you didn't mention about the crescent. Our crescent and the flags being in August, I thought it would complete the picture, and whether our crescent will ever go to the full moon. But my question is, Minister, what are the 2 most challenging, two challenges facing Singapore going forward? Do you see race relations as an issue? We had racial riots before. I was almost killed. I saw people being slashed, being killed in front of my eyes during the racial riots of 1964. How do you see our race relations in Singapore, and what continue to be the challenges for Singapore in terms of race relations? Thank you.
Just one more question, Mr. Zainal. Yeah.
Hi, Minister. Irshad here. Minister, we are part of this thing called the Emerging Leaders Network at SIIA. And as an Emerging Leaders Network, I mean, there's several of us here. What qualities do you see young Singaporeans, or what qualities do you suggest young Singaporeans to build, and what capabilities to build and possess in this VUCA BANI world?
So, Minister, 3 questions: US-Singapore defense, Zainal's question about Crescent and 2 challenges, as well as Ishka's question on what would you want to see on young leaders in Singapore.
Okay. US-Singapore relations, I think our perspective is that the US is an important stakeholder in the regional security. We think it is important for the US and for various other stakeholders to play a constructive role in this part of our regional security, and we will continue to encourage the US to play a constructive role in this part of the region's security. And that includes not just the physical military security, but also the economic security, and very often these 2 are intertwined. So I think that is a perspective that we continue to share with the US whenever we meet them, whether it's on the defense side or on the trade side, that just as where we started off, the economic issues are also intertwined with the security issues, and we would want to be able to work with the US on a constructive relationship, not just bilaterally, but also between the US and ASEAN, so that we can have a more peaceful and prosperous region, or we have the conditions to allow prosperity to happen in this part of the world. So that is how we see our relationship with the US. And if I may add, I think this perspective is something that we have held for a long time. This is a perspective that is not personality or administration dependent. It is a perspective that we have worked across with different administrations, and that's because we believe in a long-term, dependable, reliable relationship that we want to see with the US, and I think that will continue. On Zainal's question, what worries me? Many things worries me. But I don't think any of the things that worries me cannot be overcome. If we just remember, you asked me what is that one crescent that perhaps things worry me, I'll just put it down to one word: complacency. It's a message that I have been preaching. That's why we are called ministers. We preach every day. Why I say complacency? Because with every year of success, both on the security front, on the economic front, we might just be tempted as Singaporeans to think that this state of affair will be eternal, that we will always have our rightful place in the sun, come what may. I take a slightly different perspective that I think for us, we have to earn our rightful place in the sun. The last 61 years has been an aberration in Southeast Asian history where we are independent, we can be independent, but it is not always so. It's very tough for a small city-state to be independent. In the past, small city-states find it to be independent because they don't have a hinterland. They are always circumscribed by geography. We, for the last 61 years, have tried to transcend geography by making sure that we remain connected to the world, that while we may not have a local hinterland, we have the world as our hinterland. And that's why connectivity to the rest of the world is not an option for Singapore, it is existential for Singapore. Yes, there are challenges on the geopolitical front. Yes, there are challenges on the military front. Yes, there are also challenges on the economic and social fronts. But my sense is that if we are not complacent, we will find the solutions. We will find the solutions. But the moment we are complacent, we think that these problems will not impact us so seriously, we become complacent, then I think we are done for. Look at physical security. You look at the Russian-Ukraine conflict, you look at the Israel-Hamas conflict, you look at any other conflicts around the world in recent history. It is not about the technological prowess of countries. It's not about the equipping or not even the training of the soldiers that determines a country's security. It is whether we are vigilant and not complacent. Right up to the Ukraine conflict starting, many people in Ukraine did not believe that this will happen. In fact, there were many indicators that this could happen, but many people chose not to believe it. Likewise, for the Israel-Hamas conflict, you can also say that there were many indicators that this was going to happen. But again, many chose not to believe it. So, in a lot of these issues, it is complacency that dull our senses to respond. On the economic front, all the challenges that we see, whether is it the weaponization of geography, the weaponization of supply chains, the weaponizations of leverage, all those things, we can see it coming for quite some time. The question is whether we take it seriously and ask ourselves, if such things happen to us, what can we do and what should we do in anticipation so that we do not be caught in that situation? So first, don't get into trouble and try to stay out of trouble. Why I worry about this? Because it is very difficult for people who enjoy peace and security and economic progress to contemplate what if all this no longer can be taken as a given. And that's where complacency comes in. I don't believe that within Singapore we don't have good people that can put our minds together to manage, I won't say solve, to manage some of these challenges. Slightly better than our competitors or elsewhere. But if we are all lulled into a certain sense of complacency, then I think nothing can help us. So for me, maybe people like us, we are paid to worry before other people worry. We are paid to rejoice after everyone has rejoiced. Maybe that's our karma in life, I don't know. But I would say this, I have confidence in this generation of Singaporeans that amongst us, we have people with ideas, with energy to manage some of these very pressing challenges, so long as we don't become complacent. And that leads me to Arshad's last question. What can younger generations of Singaporeans do in service of our country to defy the odds of history for us to be independent beyond SG 100. And that is to keep ourselves connected with the rest of the world as we travel widely, seek to understand the world as it is rather than how we hope it will be. Every one of us who travel out of Singapore, we are an ambassador of Singapore. We are also potentially a data point where it can bring back a new perspective to Singapore to help enrich our perspective of how the rest of the world is working. Not just what they are doing or how they are doing things, but more importantly, why they are doing what they are doing. And collectively, with all these different perspectives coming from different parts of the world as we travel and make new friends and find new partners, we will then enrich our perspective to be very sensitive to the kind of challenges that might be emerging or have not even emerged, that can potentially either create new opportunities for Singapore or create new challenges for Singapore. So that's why when I was in MOE, I told all my IHL, the Institute of Higher Learning students, we are so blessed to be able to support them in traveling overseas. Vast majority of our IHL students would have at least one chance to travel overseas for a study program, a work project. And I told them that when you come back, I don't even need you to write long, lengthy reports on what you have seen and so forth. I just hope that every one of you can bring back one fresh perspective that we do not yet know, that can help us to be more vigilant in how we analyze the world and work out potential value propositions that we can create for ourselves so that we can be more relevant to the world. And that is my challenge. It's not easy. So many students travel overseas, I just told them, come back with one perspective that you think the rest of your classmates, the rest of your cohort, does not know. I learned that when I was a young officer working in another country. Every day, I told myself, I just need to make one new friend, to get one new perspective. It's a discipline that we need to have as fellow Singaporeans, young and old, so that we can keep ourselves vigilant and not be complacent. Okay, so on that serious note, maybe I should tell you something funny to lighten the mood a bit. Your all those looks very serious. So once I went to a university, so they showed me all the inbound and outbound students, who comes in and who goes out. So I said, very good. Can you tell me where all your students go to? So they show me. Then, lo and behold, there was one country that many of the students went to. One order of magnitude more than the rest. Guess which country? UK, Japan. It wasn't US, it wasn't China, it was Korea. So I was rather tickled. So I said, yes, okay, it's okay. All of you can go to Korea, no problem. Do you go north or south? Point noted, because you can all travel to Korea, it's not a problem. And I'm sure the Koreans will welcome us to travel and get to know their society better. But all I ask for is that even if so many people go to Korea, come back with a perspective that can enrich Singapore. And I say that not just because it's Korea or China or US. Wherever we go, try to come back with one perspective that can help enrich the Singapore data bank, if you like, of how we can see the world as it is, and we can learn something about people and then formulate our value propositions for us to stay out of trouble. So on that note, thank you all very much and hope you have enjoyed your afternoon.